G'day cocktail lovers. I decided to make this Martini week because at the start of the week there was World Gin Day and at the end of the week was Martini Day. So you know what? Martini being one of my favorite cocktails, I'm going to spend the entire week doing variations on a martini, but they stay being what I would call a proper martini or in that neighborhood. Not that 80s, 90s trend of putting whatever into a V-shaped glass and saying it's a X martini. So there'll be no porn star martini, no espresso martini, none of those other teenies, but this will be good old gin vermouth with a little bit of variation. And that's the first thing I want to say about martinis. And I am going to be a snob about this. Don't use vodka. Just don't. I mean, do if you want. I'm not the martini police. Yet. I can't punish people. Yet. But I do say very strongly, proper martini is gin and vermouth. And within that, there is a world of variation so you can customize something that suits you. The first thing you want to work out if you're exploring martinis is what you like. I do like a spectrum of martinis, but I favor the dry to very dry martinis. If you're unfamiliar with the term, this is a reference to how much gin there is compared to how much vermouth. The greater the ratio of gin to vermouth, as in the less vermouth that's in the drink, that makes it a drier martini. You increase the amount of vermouth that's in there and it becomes a wet martini. A good starting point is a 3-to-1 ratio of gin to vermouth. That's regarded as a dry martini, but it's not particularly dry. The gin's right up there, but the vermouth is very noticeable in there as well. And based on that, you can start exploring either side. Do you want a bit more vermouth or do you want a bit less? Or a lot more or a lot less? You can go all the way to where there's 2 parts vermouth to 1 part gin. That's known as a reverse martini, and that can be very good. Or the other end of the spectrum, the jokingly named Churchill martini, because there's a rumor that the way he preferred to have a martini was literally just a glass of cold gin. He wanted the gin stirred on ice, served in a chilled glass, and wave it in the general direction of Italy, because that's where the vermouth was coming from at the time. Personally, I think a ratio of about 5-to-1 or 6-to-1 is great. When I'm doing that, that means I'm going to do 2 to 2.5 ounces, 60 to 75 mils of gin to 10 or 15 mils of vermouth. So that's how I like it, but you can try the whole spectrum. It isn't just the ratio you get to play with, there's the seasoning. You don't have to put this into the cocktail, but it's quite common to do bitters, commonly orange bitters into a martini, just a couple of dashes. Or if you want a dirty martini, you put some olive brine in because olives are a common garnish for your martini. And that brings in other variations. What garnish are you going to use? Are you going to use olives? Are you going to use a twist of lemon peel? Are you going to use some cocktail onions, which would make it a Gibson martini? The thing is, when you look at that, you go, well, you can have all these different ratios, and then you can either do this seasoning, that seasoning, or no seasoning, or these particular garnishes. And the spectrum of what you can do with a martini starts to really broaden. And then you think of the virtual limitless supply of different gins and vermouths worldwide. You could make a different martini every day of your life and not come close to exhausting all the possibilities. And I will throw in, don't be scared of actually doing sweet vermouth in a martini. I, as a traditionalist, will say yes, dry vermouth is what you should put in, but don't be scared to experiment. I know with Mrs. Angry, that's how she got into martinis, because it's a bit easier to drink one with sweet vermouth rather than dry vermouth if you've never had one before. When you use sweet vermouth, which is usually red in a martini, that's often called a pink martini or a sweet martini. I've even heard it called a completely separate drink called a gin and it. But whatever, don't be afraid to actually do that bit of experimentation to find out what it is you like in a martini. Probably my top tip, if you're ordering a martini in a bar, don't try to say the James Bond speech, because the bar staff will just think you're a dick. And they've heard it from so many morons so many times who think they're cool. It's not cool. Don't do it. Also, the shaken not stirred, my personal opinion, absolute bullshit. stir your martini. Stir it on ice, which comes back to a top tip if you're making it yourself. I think a really big element of a martini is make it cold. Make it so cold. Stir it for at least 25 seconds on ice. Actually, past that, it doesn't really get much colder. But also, chill your glassware. This is why I have my martini glass waiting with some ice sitting in it. So the longer the martini stays cold, the better it tastes. So while there's a world of possibilities on how to make a martini while staying faithful to a true martini, if you come into my bar and ask me to make what I think is a good martini, it's going to go like this. In a mixing glass, I'm going to put 2 to 2.5 ounces, 60 to 75 mils of a good quality dry gin. Then I'm going to add 1/3 to 1/2 ounce, 10 to 15 mils of a dry vermouth. Then we add a lot of ice, stir that for at least 25 seconds to get it really cold and get a bit of dilution because this is a very strong drink. And then strain that into our chilled martini glass. And my garnish of choice is a twist of lemon peel. To me, a well-made martini is just so clean and fresh and bracing. Also boozy, be careful. I did see a webcomic I liked recently about what it's like drinking a martini. 50% is, I look really classy. 50% is, I'm getting really drunk. So pace yourself, particularly if you're the daring type who maybe uses a Navy strength gin in your martini. And just enjoy responsibly, I guess is the word of the day. But stay tuned for more short and long videos about martinis during Martini Week, because honestly, I can't get enough of it. Cheers.